it's good to have everybody here on this webinar, and really would encourage questions as we go. Don't feel like we have to talk at you for 30 minutes or so here, but happy to answer any questions as we dig in. So the main objective today is to really talk about our perspective at Eide Bailly about modernizing law firms or other professional services practices with platform-based technology. So we're going to talk about some customer success stories, give some examples of some of the work that we have done for other firms like yours, and we'll talk about kind of the landscape of these kind of point solution legacy systems that many of you may be using, and how that type of environment compares to more modern open API driven platforms, and how that can really accelerate your client intake, your matter management, and give you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you're managing your workloads today. And so whether you're really working in a high volume environment where you're doing a lot of the same things over and over again, or you're more of that one-off environment, these types of tools can be very beneficial for you. And then we'll talk about how do you go from where you are today to making those decisions that will really have an impact, and what the options we would really recommend that you consider are as you go along this modernization or digital transformation type journey. So with that said, let me click the slide here. My name is Noel Datko. I'm a partner with Eide Bailly, and I've been doing CRM consulting for nearly 20 years now, mostly working with the Salesforce CRM environment, but we work and support a number of other CRM-driven environments like Dynamics and Microsoft, NetSuite, CRM, Salesforce, and obviously we've had a lot of exposure and experience with many other platforms. Anna, go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Anna. I've been working in the business applications team along with Noel here in our technology consulting group. I've been working on the Salesforce CRM platforms for about 8 years now. And yeah, really excited to kick this webinar off.
Awesome. So I think to start things off, Anna, let's hop into this success story. We won't share names just because we take privacy and our non-disclosure agreements very seriously here. But we've worked with a number of law firms. So Anna, do you maybe want to share a little bit about this story and what we did for this particular client?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little background on this law firm. It was a law firm that's based in many states, so multi-state law firm. They're primarily focused in bankruptcy and Social Security. They have other practice areas as well, but that's kind of their bread and butter. And they also kind of maintain a complex communication and extensive resource pool. So being across multi-states, they have tons of resources, et cetera. So the main problems we were trying to solve, or what they came to us for, were they had this really antiquated, it was a cumbersome tool. It was clunky and outdated. It required a lot of high manual workflows, so a lot of work that had to happen outside of the system, and it didn't really have any flexibility. So anytime they changed a business process, that really had to happen outside the tool, introduce a new manual workflow, and the tool was just not able to scale with their business. So they were feeling really stagnant with the tool they currently had. So the solution we decided to implement for them was using Salesforce CRM and multiple third-party applications that were integrated directly into Salesforce. This allowed for a single platform solution. So a lot of times we need multiple tools to meet the needs of all these requirements, but then that requires a lot of swivel chair or a lot of integration work. Whereas when we can use Salesforce as a platform and we can use these applications directly integrated in, it's all one single platform for the end user. We also automated a lot of their systems and a lot of their previous manual workflows, which was fantastic. So a lot of these processes folks were doing manually outside of a system were happening more automatic inside of a tool. This allowed them to scale much faster. As soon as we launched, we actually launched 3 additional business units for them right after we launched the first one. So that was great. They were able to meet their goals a lot better. They were reducing their manual entries, reducing their paper documents. As I mentioned, a lot of their processes before were outside of the system on paper. And Obviously, this increased the productivity of their teams. They were able to have higher case intakes. In addition to all of that, one of the really good outcomes of this is right at go live for them, we were able to create proactive and actionable insight reporting. So before, with their old antiquated tool, they weren't really able to gain any insights of, what is our caseload? Are we closing these cases quickly? How fast are we turning around from an intake to a matter? So on day one with this launch, they were able to kind of start to see their insights there. It was really good success for this client.
Yeah, and this was a really enjoyable project. If I remember correctly, they were on Clio, was one of their core systems, and they were really struggling getting customizations to suit their needs. So the vendor just wasn't as responsive as they needed. It was very expensive to work through those customizations, and it took a long time to even get minimal changes made in that environment. And ultimately, this is the type of group that they do a lot of TV and radio type advertising. One of their business units, they run a full call center. We were able to bring that into Salesforce and really drive a lot of automation with their client intake and evaluation, approval of any matters in terms of the matter acceptance. And then again, the volume of work, we leveraged a project management application, and some of that reporting was just, hey, who's handling how much work, and how can we easily move that around for our staff and make their lives better, and that was a significant impact for them. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on here. But with that, I wanted to lead into some of this limited support type infrastructure that exists out there for law firms and other professional services organizations, where we're using these point built solutions that weren't really built as a platform. They weren't really intended to be integrated. And so if there's any integration availability at all, it's generally very limited, or requires that vendor to open up those APIs and spend a lot of time kind of talking about what those requirements might be. In addition, right, a lot of these legacy platforms, we find that the customizations are just really painful. But it's also, we can't report on that data. We can't get to our data, or if we can get to that data with some of the other software, we get to it in really challenging to leverage data formats. So, older SQL type environments and extractions, things where we get just random file types that most people aren't familiar with, and they're just challenging to deal with. And so what we want to do is we want to help our clients understand kind of the cost of working with some of these legacy systems, but also working through an evaluation of, hey, what is this system really adding to the overall business performance? It may speak the language of the business, but that's easy to leverage and make something like a Salesforce or a NetSuite or these other platforms, Microsoft. It's easy to make them speak the language that you're speaking, and build those workflows that you've come to love and know and expect here. So even though that these tools kind of sound great on paper, these limitations really hamstring the overall scalability of the business, your capabilities to really manage your staff, and really get a good idea of reporting, let alone one of the biggest challenges that we run into is that there's just no marketing capabilities. We can't come back and communicate with our clients in a really meaningful way, and so we're having to maintain another database in Constant Contact or MailChimp or Pardot or some of the other marketing automation platforms there. So there's a lot of effort that goes into those types of things when we're dealing with this type of environment. Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the platform-driven approach and what we see here, and why we find this to be a much more robust environment for most of our professional services firms, especially for law firms?
Absolutely. So why use a platform-driven approach? Primarily is that platform systems are really designed to be highly configurable, meaning that's some of these older systems are built in a very specific way. These platform solutions say, hey, we're going to give you a platform and then customize it to meet your needs. So that's kind of their bread and butter, is that they have created a platform that you can configure, which means you can use it across multiple departments. It doesn't have to just fit one business area. As Noel mentioned, marketing, customer service, that all kind of ties into your intakes, your matters, your cases. These solutions can be tailored to meet industry requirements. So a lot of our success stories we're going to get into have industry standards or government standards or requirements that are placed on them. Those requirements change year to year. Laws change year to year. You guys have to keep up with that. These systems are designed to handle those changes and handle those changes frequently, which is great, right? You're not kind of baked into one solution and stuck with one thing when somebody else changes your regulation. Another great benefit to these platform driven solutions are the way I like to say it. There's a more technical term of iPaaS and open APIs, but they are allowed to talk to other systems, meaning they have been developed in order to use an iPaaS solution such as Boomi, Workato, MuleSoft in order to talk to your ERP. So if you have a separate accounting system, that tool is already designed to have that open API to use, like I said, an iPaaS solution, talk to other tools. They're also designed to have third-party apps, which we talked about in our first success story. So if you have a project management tool you really like, if you have a marketing tool you really like, these are already kind of set up and ready to go so they can be integrated into a single platform.
Yeah, so Anna, when I look at this, I think, man, that looks expensive. And the reality is it can be, but it doesn't have to be. When we look at these tools and the flexibility of these platforms, there's a couple of key things that I think that we should consider as we start to look at these evaluations. And we'll kind of come back to, hey, how do we make these evaluations? How do we make some of these decisions? But realistically, some of these legacy systems, they're really costing our clients a lot of money because they're not able to achieve the productivity of their workforce that they would like to see. Frequently, we're all doing a lot of work. We're all working long hours. And so anything that we can do to help alleviate that pressure of our staff has a huge impact in the overall morale and the efficiency of the work that we can deliver. Frequently we may not be able to bill for as many hours as we would like as a percentage, so our utilization rates are lower. Really thinking about the platforms that we're looking at here, that there's a number of costs that go into that, and you don't have to do everything all at once. So Anna, you mentioned that these tools are modular. They're meant to be scalable and flexible there. And so as we look at that, this is one of those key things. You can do pieces at a time. That first law firm that we shared, they chose to do a lot all up front. They basically went through a full digital transformation project and replaced almost everything. We'll talk about another client here in just a second that really did a minimal portion of this to really see a lot of good incremental gains for their organization. But there's a lot of options here, and we've put a lot of names on this list. Largely, we just want you to be aware of what some of those things are that you should probably be looking into and learning more about. It doesn't have to be all of these, but as you're thinking about, hey, maybe I'm going down this path and I want a more effective software suite, I want better productivity tools, these are some names that you should start becoming familiar with and understanding how these types of tools all come together. So what are the big benefits of doing this? First of all, you own your own data, you have complete data accessibility, and you can see who your customers are and your lifetime interaction with that. Salesforce calls this customer 360. So we've just gone ahead and stolen that term from them and said, hey, look, let's understand who our customers are and what is our relationship with them. Some of these customers we can continue to service for a long time. Other times we need to share those relationships with other people. The other key thing that we really love about these tools is just extending your business processes and scaling them over multiple practices. So a great example of this, was that first client. Really, they only had two focuses, but they have a huge volume. They had a couple of other ancillary things, but they do a lot of work in those spaces. That's great. But if you are on the opposite side of things and you say, hey, I've got 20 different practices in my firm, and they all have different processes, how would a system like this help? Well, same thing, just in terms of versus handling like volume of matters, we're talking about volume of processes, and these systems can handle that as well. And you can really customize those processes, which is what our other clients have had problems with in Clio or Lawbase or some of these other environments where they're just not as flexible as they need for, hey, I've got these specific requirements for my customer intake. I need some logic to guide me through that path. You know, my matter management here is actually quite complex. I deal with a lot of appeals and other things, and I need a system that can handle the flexibility of that in an easy way. And not only that, I may need to handle some high turnover in some of my resources. You know, or what happens, I've got such a volume here, what happens when somebody gets sick? How do I juggle that workload? And so we use project management tools to really give us that flexibility of creating those processes, making them flexible, and then allowing us to use, say, skills-based management for the resourcing to assign certain aspects and tasks of our matters and the project work that we're doing to the right people at the right time. In addition to that, we start to get into a lot of you know, digital document management, integrating that with all of our other systems, and then just overall reporting that on that information in a meaningful way. So I can start to get dashboards on my phone or my mobile device, you know, iPad, whatever it might be, and I can get a really great view of the health of my business or the status of any of you know, my matters, my project tasks, who's working on what, who's being well utilized, who's not being well utilized, and I can make really good business decisions at a glance from that information. So with that said, I want to share a couple of screenshots. We're not going to do like a full demo or anything here, but this is some of the custom intake routing that we have built for our clients in the past, where, hey, I can look at, am I, you know, talking to somebody who needs Social Security disability, bankruptcy, you know, some other service that we might have here, and that is going to guide me down a path that's appropriate for that particular type of intake situation. And from there, I can start to collect as much information or as little information as is appropriate for this type of environment. There's a number of ways that we can help accommodate this, but the ideal state is whether I do this in high volume or whether I just have a lot of complexity in the type of things that I'm trying to evaluate for whether or not I'm going to engage with a particular client, I can accommodate those things quickly and fairly easily here. So that way, if I have any turnover in the folks who are helping me with intake, it's a guided process. It's very helpful, and I can ensure that I'm collecting the information for review and, you know, future states as we work through that very easily. It all goes into the same environment. In addition to that, once I've approved and accepted that matter, I can start to look at each task, whether there's dependencies, whether there are other workflows associated with that, and I can start to get great visibility into not only what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, how long it's going to take, and who's doing it. And then I can fairly quickly, with automation and other tools that are built into, in this case, we're using a tool called TaskRay for this project management. I can quickly make adjustments to this as I go. And one of the cool things that we've done for a lot of our law firms that we work with is we call it matter stitching, where essentially, you know, we get to a certain point in a matter and we now have to branch and do a completely new process. So we get to an appeal or something else, and with the click of a button, we can reset and realign all of our tasks to the appropriate next steps for that environment without having to do a bunch of manual work and effort in making those assignments. Again, another view in this environment that really helps us get a feel for where those tasks are and what I need to do next so that I can stay on top of all of that in a visually easy to manage way. So I'll pause there and just open it up for any questions thus far, and then we're going to talk to how do I get to this point. So I've got one, what size or complexity of law firm is required to justify the time and cost required for these tools? Really good question. We have worked with larger firms that have, 200-300 employees or staff, and a number of partners and other attorneys that are working for them. And then we've also done this type of work for firms that are quite small, where there's maybe 2 or 3 attorneys and less than 10 staff. Now, the thing that you want to consider there is the level of effort and the level of detail that you're going to get into for the work to be performed may be quite different. So let me see what I've got on. I think the next slide. There's some reporting, but the next slide is, this is actually an example of a smaller environment where basically the goal of this was just to get that customer 360 view. So this firm is considerably smaller than the first firm that we had talked about. They do have an international focus, and their goal is to really support venture capital and growth organizations who are working in kind of this innovative technology type space or disrupting other markets and that type of thing. So they're dealing with a lot of people who have their fingers in a lot of different pies. And so one of the key things that was really critical for them was seeing those relationships and understanding where that can go in their environment. Where's that white space? What are the opportunities that we can leverage to help these organizations? So they didn't replace their matter management tool in this environment, but they did drive the core customer 360 and reporting and visualization, in this case out of Salesforce, so they could start to tie that together in addition to some data analytics work using I believe it was Tableau in this case, and a data warehouse, so that they could bring all the information from some of the other environments that they were working with and visualize that. The level of effort for something like this might be anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000, give or take. And then full digital transformation type projects could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And usually these projects take anywhere from 3 months to a year, maybe slightly longer. Just depends on the goals and objectives that you're looking for. The nice thing here is you can space that out as you see fit for your organization and the goals and priorities that you might have. We have other firms that say, hey, I want to really just focus on my matter management piece. We're just going to do that. There are other opportunities to just integrate other data sets depending on the other legacy tools that you're using, and we can just focus on the data analytics piece. So there's a lot of options there, but Anna will get into a little bit more about, hey, how do we make those decisions and what's most important? So great question. Any other questions? Feel free to come off mute or throw something in the chat. Okay, Anna, I'll pass it back to you. Let's talk about how we get there.
Yeah, I think first off, what is digital transformation? We use this word a lot, and what does it mean? A lot of people can define it as like the reimagining of business in the digital age. Okay, that's great. What does that mean, right? And it's really just, how do we use digital technologies to create new or modify existing business processes, our business culture, and our customer experience to meet changing business and market requirements? That's kind of what I define it as. So what is our roadmap to modernization? We really like this visual here. It's kind of a progression, as you can see, and most folks are starting out here on the far left in this awareness column. And our goal is to get you all the way into, into winning and even into transforming. That's kind of the goal here. So how do we get there? And first step is being in that awareness column. What is it? What is our operating model? What are our legacy systems? Let's be aware of all the things we have. Then you kind of move into learning, and that's really, okay, what is digital transformation? How are we going to get digital success? You can see here that one of the first bullet points under learning is pockets of digital success. Maybe this is implementing a solution for your matter management. Maybe this is just implementing a solution for your customer 360 view, or just your intake. That's kind of your learning phase. Your competing phase is you're starting to grow and build on that. You're really kind of getting automated in your processes. You're becoming data literate. More of your stuff is becoming digital, less paper documents, using digital document storage solutions. And really, I think a key attribute here to be in kind of this middle competing stage is that we have that executive buy-in, or that digital transformation is really driven from the top down. So a lot of times in the awareness and learning, this is driven, maybe by an individual business unit or your IT team, something like that. Really, when we get to this middle stage, it's the executives are kind of driving this whole digital transformation for the entire organization from the top down. How do we get to winning? Winning is now we actually have a data-driven solution. Typically, that's one or many tools, integrations, these tools talking to each other. We've gotten some agile IT, which means we are iterative in our development. We're constantly learning and improving these tools. Again, as we talked about with platform solutions, they are meant to be iterative. So that's a goal there. And we're really kind of seeing those insights now in that winning stage. We're actually able to report real-time operational insights. We're seeing how the tool is being used. We're seeing increases in our caseload and in our velocities there. We're seeing our productivity go up with our teams. And then the last stage is really transforming. And that's where digital transformation is kind of, I don't want to say complete. I don't think you're really ever complete in digital transformation, but you are optimized, right? All of your systems are running. As I like to say, like all cylinders are firing, but you're leveraging all sorts of technology. You have automated data insights. You can bring in AI or machine learning, and the whole organization is running optimized there.
So Anna, I think this is really cool. It tells us, hey, what are our kind of goals along that path that we're getting there? How do I decide what my goals and objectives are for my business? How do I kind of keep progressing here?
Absolutely. Do you want to hit to the next slide?
Oh, yes.
Perfect segue. So how to achieve your objectives? I think that's a great question, is like, okay, that's great. You showed me this digital map, but how do I get there? And really where I think Eide Bailly is set apart from other, let's say, tech consulting divisions, is we view this in a three-prong approach, if you will, or three-circle approach, as the model shows here. But it's not just about your technology. It's about your people and your processes as well. So yes, we need to get, your old antiquated systems up to modern speed. We need that technology. We need a platform solution. We need integrations, et cetera. But that's only really 1/3 of how we get there. We still have to get your people on board. What is our organizational model? Who are the executives that are supporting this model? We really need that executive support. As I mentioned in that middle phase, that digital transformation has to be coming from the top down. And then user training, user adoption, those are huge as well. And then the processes. So processes change as well. If you've ever worked in a company, change is scary, right? Especially for your users. So what are those governance processes we're going to introduce? How are we going to build a steering committee? If you've never heard of a steering committee, this is a great opportunity for us to talk about what that is, how we implement what a steering committee is, what are those decision-making models that we need, the feedback workflows, our business process models, and then obviously, how do we measure the success of that? So how we achieve those objectives, we're going to keep going on the next slide here, but is really through our iterative development, that's our technology, our change management, that's people, and governance, which is our processes. So we have a phased approach here at Eide Bailly, 5 steps here. First step is discovery. And again, that kind of leads to that awareness on that digital roadmap, is like, where are we? What is the status of my current systems in place? Is my system, is the software good? Does it just need to be enhanced? Do I need to kind of rip and replace? That's a software evaluation. Readiness for change. So we do a whole discovery with you, your organization, your executives, on evaluating how ready your organization is for change. That's the people and process part. That's different for all sorts of organizations, depending on where you guys are and where your processes are. And then we give you a recommended approach. Hey, our approach is, we need to change these software tools. We need to change these business processes. We need to change these business structures. That's really kind of where we come in and define that recommended approach there. Second phase is our assessment. So then we go even deeper in beyond that discovery phase. We do a current state review. We identify all of the key areas. Which business areas do we want to actually tackle? In some cases, maybe we only want to tackle the high volume ones first, or we want to tackle all of the business areas. That again varies on business practice to business practice. From there, we present and validate our findings. The design phase is how are we going to actually do that? That's our recommended approach to execution. That's where you're starting to see project plans, our executive presentations. We're identifying those steering committees, even identifying those operating committees. We're identifying the decision-making pathways. We're designing the processes and putting together full technology system maps. So if you're going to have multiple systems that talk to each other, if you're going to have integrations, data analytics, warehousing, what does that look like? How are those systems all going to talk to each other? And when are they going to talk to each other? Again, as we talked about, sometimes a phased approach may be better, or maybe we do it together. That's really what a process design, project planning, system map kind of go into. Fourth stage is execute. Let's put this into practice, right? So we have our change initiation. Again, this is a big part of that people and process. You're going to hear me harp on that a lot, but again, technology is really only 1/3 of getting you fully digitally transformed. How do we get your folks ready for this change that's going to come, right? They're used to using their specific tool. They're used to using maybe their sticky notes and their filing cabinet. How are we going to get them to use a tool there? Communication out to your teams, communication out to the processes, or not communication to the process, but communicating out the process changes there. For the technology part, we use iterative development. So it isn't just a, hey, we're going to, go build a bunch of stuff and then we're going to show it to you and hope we got it right. As we build, you're in that process with us. So you're seeing that development. You're seeing the technology as it's being developed, so we can make those minor tweaks and modifications as we go. Our training is a huge part of the execute phase. How do we get users ready, again, to make this change? Getting those users trained up, communication, and then putting this actually into practice. And then the last phase is really about monitoring. So once this is ready and we've launched it, things are running smoothly, how do we measure how effective this was? Do we need to make tweaks? Are there continuous improvements we need to make? The answer is yes. If we're staying up with digital transformation, there's always continuous improvements that will be made, right? Whether that's regulations that changes, laws that changes, tax rules that change, those are changes that have to happen to your system. So what does that look like? Not just for the technology being changed continuously, but again, how do we communicate these changes out to your people? We have support engagements that we do that we engage with you guys to kind of keep that process going. And then we also want to make sure your users adopt these tools, right? It's very easy for some users to be like, hey, I just want to keep doing the things I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep using my sticky note and my pad of paper. So how do we get users to actually adopt all that? That's really kind of part of this larger plan. Noel, did I miss anything or other thoughts you want me to cover there?
I think you've done a great job there. And I'm actually just going to go back one more slide. And I think that
oh yeah,
there's a couple of really critical things that I would like this group to take away from this discussion. I know we've put a lot of information out there, and there's a lot to kind of circle through. But this, people, processes, technology, those types of things are really critical. And as you think about where you're going with your technology and your business, I think it's really critical that you identify that path, and you identify the key pain points that you're experiencing now, and try and be very clear with those. What are those top 3 to 5 things that, if you could wave a magic wand, would transform your business? Start with thinking about that, right? This is really painful, and I wouldn't limit that to if you're the managing partner or you're in the leadership team. Go spend some time with the staff and ask them that question. Hey, if you had a magic wand and you could change XYZ about your job, what would those 3 to 5 things be? And maybe you can only accomplish one, but you need to know more than just that, because you need to be able to prioritize and set some goals and objectives of where you're going to be 5 years from now. 10 years from now? And if you're just not sure about that, start asking questions. Go back to that first slide and say, hey, what systems am I using today and what systems are available? What do I need to know about these things? We feel really strongly about, again, breaking things down for most professional services organizations, especially law firms, client intake, matter or project management, and then tying that out with your financials are kind of the big blocks for most of these things. And there's a bunch of other ancillary stuff there. But make sure as you're looking at that type of process and as you're setting those goals and you're evaluating those pain points, that you understand, is it a technology problem? Is it a process problem? Is it a people problem? Or more often than not, the people are not the problem. They're actually making things way better because they're finding workarounds for what could be a bad process. And that bad process may have come from poor technology or vice versa, right? And so as you really evaluate those, really think about, again, people, process, and technology, and then come back to where am I in this phase? Am I discovering? Am I prepared to execute something? Do I really know what that is? Do I need some assistance assessing where we are and working through that? But start to put yourself in this map and start to pick things. What is that one thing, maybe two things that I really want to change about, whether it's my business process, my technology. More often than not, it's not my people, but it could be people. And look at that and say, hey, what do I really need to change to get me to where I want to be in 5 to 10 years from now? And then start working through this. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can put that together in a roadmap. Anna, do you want to add anything to that?
Do you want to go back once again to that slide?
Yeah,
it's kind of
sure.
my favorite slide.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really important. And if you haven't gotten this message yet, maybe I'll just repeat it. But that last bullet point there is successful digital transformation includes competent people, support processes, and an overall plan. I don't remember the stat off the top of my head. It's something like 70 or 80% of technology projects fail because of no plan and no kind of governance and change management plan. So it's rarely a cause of technology solutions failing because the technology wasn't there. It's because we didn't use the whole process here, the people, the process, and the technology. So I think that's a really important factor there is we can get you a third of the way there with just technology, but it's the people and the process that we really want to focus on to make sure we get you 100% there.
Absolutely. So Anna, I'm going to kind of wrap us up with one more really interesting case study. So this is a real estate law firm. I'd love your input on this as we go through this. But this client came to us with similar kind of concerns that I've got old systems, but they had been filling the gaps of those old systems with an incredibly complex Excel spreadsheet that had a ton of automations built into it, macros, tie-outs to their other systems, and it wasn't scaling for them. But the amount of information that they were consuming every year to help work through any issues with value assessments and working with state and local tax issues, things like that. They were collecting just tons and tons of information in multiple jurisdictions. So there was variation in what they had to deal with across the board there. And they wanted to be able to market to their clients. They wanted to see and understand their relationships with these clients over a decade or more as they had been working with them. And they just couldn't bring all that data together in a meaningful place. Not only that, but they wanted to do document generation out of the system to streamline the amount of time that it took to put that together. And so, in this case, client intake was not a huge concern because a lot of the clients that they're working with are repeat customers. They're doing this every year for them over and over and over again. But what was really critical is they had to get all of that information in. And what was it? They have to collect all their information by like February. So like from January to the end of February, all of the data that they would ever collect for their customers on their properties had to be brought into the system all at once. So this is this huge effort from an army of people. And then they had to, file a bunch of paperwork with state and local government and go through appeals and other things like that. And so in this case, we did use TaskRay for matter management, but we did something unique where we used our robotic process automation team. So this is using a tool called Power Automate, which is in the Microsoft Power platform. Most of your organizations probably have this tool, are paying for it with your Microsoft licenses already, but aren't using it. And so we were able to automate the data intake and the critical elements that we needed for reporting and document generation and decision making, and bring that back into Salesforce, back into TaskRay, and then spread that out across tasks and other business processes without totally disrupting what they were already doing, and allowing them for a great deal of flexibility and scalability going forward in the future. So again, I think my key takeaway on these things is it's not going to be a one size fits all for everybody. There's going to be unique solutions, but platforms and these types of tools enable you to leverage those unique solutions and don't lock you into that box. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it a little bit at a time, or you can do it all at once. It's up to you. We can help you create a roadmap for that. Anna, what would you add?
Yeah, I would add, just as you mentioned, so this client, in contrast to our first success story where their kind of business problems and challenges were around high intake, right? The caseload was really, really high. The contrast here is the intake for this client, as Noel mentioned, is pretty low. They don't actually acquire too many new clients per year. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lower number, right? It's not hundreds per day, it's maybe 10 per year or something like that. But it's the volume of work they're doing for each of these clients that was really their focus there. And this solution, as Noel mentioned, that we proposed, worked really well to be a combined solution. So we utilized the platform for what the platform is really good at. And then we utilized the business process automation through robotic process in order to leverage what Excel is really good at. Because there is pros and cons to using Excel versus using a platform. So why not leverage both? And I think this was the perfect use case where it was like, let's leverage Excel for what it's really good at, high data intake, and then push that data into Salesforce in an automated fashion. It also allowed for them to, as you can imagine, with cities and districts and jurisdictions and states, I don't even know all of that, and they were multi-state, all of those laws changed yearly. I'm not exactly sure how often, but that was one of their pain points too, is, hey, these rates change on a yearly basis for each district or each jurisdiction. So how can we manage that? And that's kind of that continuous improvement. So we built a solution that allows them to make those modifications every single year that those modifications come through. So it's not a pain point for them going forward when it says, hey, the tax rate has changed, or the jurisdiction, the boundaries have changed, or something like that. They're very easy to kind of adapt to those changes now. So a huge success for this client.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, a lot of flexibility, a lot of critical things that can be worked on there. So that's what we had for today. Would be happy to stick around and answer any questions, specific or broad, whatever you would prefer. Again, feel free to put them in the chat. But overall, just to reiterate, people, process, technology, really look at, hey, what are those key areas that could make a big difference in your organization. We tend to think about that as, for most professional services, client intake, project or matter management, and then integrating that with your financial system of record. So it could be NetSuite, it could be Intact, QuickBooks, any number of tools that are out there from the ERP perspective, just to really streamline and make your lives quite a bit easier.